So welcome everyone to CanMedIMG. This is a video which was demanded on the Instagram channel as a post-match conference or a post-exam conference on the new updated format of the 2025 MCCQE1 exam. The session just ended mid-May. We got a chance to have a look at the first iteration of an only MCQ exam. And a few of us at CanMedIMG have been taking these exams for the past 2-3 exam cycles, and two of us took it in this cycle. And this is a video for that. Maybe an introductory video is in session as well. But before that, we want to get into the actual nitty-gritty and actually provide some value here. And just as an introduction, the exam is now 230 questions split into two 115 question blocks with a 40-minute break in the middle in which you are allowed to leave the exam hall. Now, maybe it is time actually to give a bit of insight into the actual way the exams are run. And in the city of Toronto that we are in right now, the exam is actually run by a company called Prometric. There is an option that in that 40-minute break, you can leave. You leave your belongings in a locker, but you can leave the exam hall itself. You can go downstairs, and there's a Tim Hortons, and there's a place for you to go and have lunch. 40 minutes goes by relatively quickly. There's an initial thing I wanted to mention as well for the exam. When you start the exam, there are nerves. It's a 6.5 hour total experience. And I think a lot of candidates, they definitely start off anxious. And I was seen. That is something that is normal. So I think that's important to realize. But the tip would be, I guess, to use that positive energy or to use the adrenaline to your advantage and to pace yourself well. The other side of that is there is sort of a dump after the break, right after the break, and also towards the end of the exam, where you have to just make sure you're on top of time, not taking too much time on questions, and that's when fatigue can really set in. But more on exam technique later, maybe, if needed. But let's get to the actual talking points. So we talked about test day experience a bit, and we talked about the updated exam format. The learning objectives are set by MCC, and they are up. A good portion of them were seen, discussed on Instagram page a few times, which question bank is most similar. And we recommend UWorld. We've used the Canada Qbank, and we've used the ACE Qbank. The ACE Qbank had the most similar format of questions and difficulty of questions to the real exam. And question difficulty breakdown. The reality is exam technique and not being fatigued in the exam, preparation, I guess, mentality as well, will carry you further than being over prepared in certain topics, which may not come as often. It might not do justice to the amount of effort you've put in. So that is that. Now, study resources we've discussed, but an important shout out to the MCC preparatory exams. There were a few repeat questions from that. Okay, so there's a B citing actually, but we'll continue regardless. So MCC practice exams, there's a new AI built 2025 MCQ package, 115 questions, which we recommend you get. But we're also going to be making our own question bank, which will be mimicking a lot of the things that we saw. No repeat exam, no questions that will be lifted from the exam itself, nothing like that. But similar themes and similar styles, and I think that would be valuable for a lot of people. Then we have the prep timeline and strategy. So I think there's an very interesting thing about taking an exam like this. It really depends on how you have to understand what your base knowledge is. So maybe doing a prep exam that is one of the older ones. I think it's the 324A on the website. That would really help. Gets you a baseline, gets you familiar with the exam technique. I have a policy that it only takes a number of questions before you get into an exam technique, and then you are set for life in the way you think. You can answer any sort of medical question, um, after that, with the frameworks that you have. So, for example, if there's a question with lab values, you need to see that a few times. There's the ethics questions. There's a biostat question that you see, and using that framework a few times, you can use that. So for prep timeline, I would say if you're straight out of medical school or you're in medical school, 3 months should be plenty of time, with a heavy load on questions, using a good study plan. And someone who's fresh out of medical school, as two of us were, and one person was 1 year out. They've done all the rotations in med school and have a pretty good grasp on them. 3 months is plenty of time dedicated, and a dedicated period of 1 month where you can just switch to questions and question banks will really give you a good hang of how to do questions and what to expect. Because these question banks are getting good at replicating the exam. There were a few things that were different, but that is the best strategy that we've seen until now. Questions, questions, questions. An important shout out to Anki. So there is now a plan for us to make a post on the important Anki decks that people have compiled with due credit. There's the famous Ottawa deck, and there are a few decks based on Toronto notes, which really alleviates a lot of the hassle of actually reading Toronto notes, as many of us dread sometimes. So that's that. And now the most important part of the video is the common topics. And the point is not to give too much away from the exam, but to give an indication of what to expect and how you can better prepare, so while keeping it fair. There are certain topics that have been that are high yield, that we know are high yield from day one, and obs and gynae comes at number one from those. Then we have pediatrics. And the important thing, the positive thing that we noted in the exam was that there wasn't too much emphasis on, memory. More concepts were tested, and things like developmental delays, milestones. That's not exact timelines, for example, did not come up that much. It wasn't so frequent as you would expect in a rotation exam, for example, in university. So that's one thing we noted, but those two are very common. Then we come into emergency medicine, acute care medicine, and general surgery. Bulk of the exam were these topics, and internal medicine. Even more than medicine itself. Emergency scenarios, surgery, a little bit of ortho, not too much. But then there was that. And then on the tail end of the exam, there were ethics. Biostats made an appearance, and it's always something that I think towards the end of your preparation, to secure that confidence, it is good to review those tests, to review those there's a biostats cheat sheet actually that's it might be posted on the Instagram page. That's common that people use, and it's important. I think it's a very good resource to look through that if wanted. Then I think if you know the formulas, know how to implement the biostats formulas and understand them, that should carry you enough for the exam. Obviously, it's better to have an understanding, but depends on how much time you have. So that was those are the main topics: ethics, biostat, obs and gynae, pediatrics, emergency medicine, preventative health, and family medicine. Yes, a significant portion of the exam, maybe 15%. Maybe 15%. But there were certain questions and themes that we have seen, made: medical assistance in dying, ethics, ethical scenarios, relations to consent, capacity. These are important themes, and they definitely come up. Again, I think moving on to exam day performance, which I mentioned earlier, actually, the exam itself is not extremely difficult. I know it sounds, in hindsight, obviously it sounds It sounds a bit cliche, it sounds a bit weird to say, but that is the overall feeling that most test takers have taken. So that should relieve some anxiety, make some reassurance. And common mistakes that are made. And this is a common mistake that you could make before the exam is to do with performance. Actually, it's to maybe take on too much work in the latter days. Is advice I get from family, and it was very, very valuable advice. Rest. The day before the exam, a few of us, all we did was rest, relax, walk, talk, socialize. Relax the mind, which doesn't mean just rest it and think about the exam. Maybe even take time away. Sports are important as well. So that was really an important part of the journey. Then we have, scoring and what it means. So as of yet, we have no indication of what the scores are. Last year's passing score was something like 224. I may be mistaken. I'll have it corrected actually. But the scores were steadily increasing, and I expect the scores to be higher. That is the reality. There is no CDM section now, and the exam is more straightforward, easier to grade, more uniform, so more fair. But I think slightly easier, there's less pitfalls, but fairer. So that is, I think, comforting advice, definitely. And final advice and next steps. So when to take the exam. If you're in medical school, I'd say, if you want to take on a challenge, if you're finding that, you're on top of your studies, at the end of your third year in North America, or if it's a traditional rest of the world medical school, the UK or otherwise, the end of your fourth year, when you've done half of your clerkships or half of your rotations, more than half, and the important ones are OBS, gynae, pediatrics, general surgery, GP, family medicine, and then focus on emergency medicine, and that will give you a very good, fresh place to actually go and tackle this exam, and it's very doable. And finally, if there's any advice for IMGs, so my IMGs who have maybe perhaps taken some time off from studying, or have been working, I think questions again, refresh. Anki, I think you will find if if it really affects you, that decision fatigue of doing questions again and again, Anki will just will space repetition but give you that information rather than you have to make a decision every time. But it'll just trigger recall. So I think that is something was used by seniors. So we had one of us who's 8 years out of medical school. So, and they definitely suggested that as opposed to Toronto notes, just cold reading. Some of us like to just cold read, so that's fine. And in terms of video, there's a specific resource for ethics, particularly outside of Toronto notes, that we recommend is Randy Neil MD YouTube channel. Probably link it in the description. Good bioethics series, good starter, because eventually you do have to look at the website, but it is a good starter. And finally, part of the resource I should have mentioned actually earlier is the CMPA website, the OMA website, and the Preventative Health and Immunization Guidelines website, Canadian immunizations website. So take initiative. MCC objectives are out there. We have a study plan that includes all the study MCC objectives in boxes for you to go over day by day. The important part is that you look at the objectives, and if it's an objective that has to do with, for example, a condition that has guidelines for it, and this is probably towards the last month of your exam where you start to gauge which these type of conditions are. For example, colon cancer. There will be indications, there will be timelines for the immunizations of colon cancer in the on these websites, and we'll link them in the description. But that's important to read. And for ethics and for biostats, it's good to do the questions on the CMPA website at the bottom of the paragraphs. It's not a must to read all of it. So there was one definition or a few definitions that come from the exam every year. I don't want to go into specifics, Don't want to give specifics from the exam, but there were definitely moments where, you notice that, for example, some of us read all of the CMPA website. It's not necessary. There are summaries at the end of each chapter. There are 13 chapters, but it's not a hard read. If you skim it, you have to read to skim rather than to indulge. So that's something, and gain valuable information from the summaries. And though there's bullets at the end, the definitions will give you more than enough. And yeah, there's a few other websites, OMA, which can be used, and I'll probably have a separate maybe video on the resources on the websites themselves. But these are the free resources from the MCC. As of yet, that is the best bet. There is a study plan that we've made on our Instagram page available, and I'll link it actually here as well. Other than that, I think maybe a group study session a few times a week, so especially towards the exam, really helps to take the edge off different type of advice. Obviously, be hydrated in the exam, standard advice, but try not to be, addicted to sugar or caffeine, because in the exam, when you don't have this, or you don't try to go without it, it might affect you, might remove you from baseline a little bit. That's a bit of humble personal advice, so take that as you want to. But I think that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you for joining. Sorry, it was probably a bit longer than it needed to be, but those are the important takeaways from the 2025 MCCQE1 exam, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one.